At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up.
Okay, so a roll call, John Hymas,
Here, present.
and then Hugh Beatty.
Here.
And then excused today are John McLaughlin and John Brown, who are unable to make this meeting. That is a quorum, so we'll go ahead and start the meeting. The mission of the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District is to ensure the entirety of the property is protected in perpetuity and public ownership with respect to its ecological, recreational, educational functions, and to serve as a fiscal mechanism through which the district via tax levy will repay the city of Bellingham for the Greenways Endowment Fund loan. This meeting will be recorded. A visual and audio recording of this meeting will be posted on the CCFPD website. If your camera is on during the meeting, your voice, likeness, and surroundings will be publicly available and viewable on our website. If you choose to speak with your camera off or by calling on a telephone, only your voice will be recorded. I'd like to officially call the meeting to order and to ask that we
At the tone, please record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Hi, Leah. If you get this, can you call me on this cell phone number? I am in a...
Bob, can you hear us? Yeah, he just put himself on. Yeah.
Actually,
Bob, we
I
can-
just muted him, but
Yeah.
I don't.
That's great. Yeah. Maybe we can bring him back sometime. I'd like a motion to approve today's agenda for today's meeting. Is there a motion to that effect? And are there any corrections, additions, deletions?
I'll move that we approve the agenda for today's meeting. I don't have any additions.
Moved by Hugh
I'll second that.
and seconded by John. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 There we go. And we'd like to have at the beginning of our meeting, so that we don't have to keep you here for the whole meeting, a discussion about the noxious weeds in the Chuckanut Community Forest. We have a special guest with us from the Whatcom County Noxious Weed Board, Laurel Baldwin, and she's a staff person there, and we're delighted to have her join us. Would you help us find our way through this noxious weed forest that we're in here? We know that there are noxious weeds there. We have some we're aware of. We probably don't know all that are there, and try to figure out how we can work cooperatively to make things better. Laura, would you like to speak and just share with us?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I did invite the rest of our board. They weren't able to confirm whether or not they were going to join us tonight. But I am here, and I'm happy to talk with you about the weeds in Chuckanut Community Forest. And we went and did a survey through there last Thursday and did some mapping and just had a look overall. I think we hiked maybe 4 or 5 miles inside the forest, just around on all the trails that we could get to. I don't think we saw every inch of the forest, of course, but I got a pretty good feel for the impacts on the forest itself. There were some surprises. I was surprised to not find a few things in that forest because Fairhaven has quite a population of something called spurge laurel, which is an evergreen plant, and we really didn't see any in there. And this would be the time of year that we would see it pretty well. So that was a nice surprise. There was an oddity of bamboo planting in the middle of the forest in an open area, which was, that was a surprise. I don't know how that got there. Perhaps somebody intended to plant bamboo in there, but it's a short growing species. I don't know my bamboo cultivars well enough to tell you which one, but there is some bamboo in there. And in fact, we have a mapping program, and if it would be okay for me to share my screen, if it would be all right for those of you, if you're interested, I could share with you my mapping.
That'd be
program.
great. That'd be really helpful, I think. And is
Okay.
Irene Lambro on the board?
No,
Hi,
not on the
I'm,
weed board.
I'm sorry, I'm on the South Neighborhood Association.
Okay, great.
board.
Thank you. Well, welcome. I don't see any other board members, though, Laura, yet.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and share my screen. Let's see, where are we?
Should be a green button at the bottom in the center.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the screen that I want to share.
Maps are always very, very helpful. And so I'm
Yeah,
looking
well, I
forward
have to, yeah.
yeah.
There we
Yeah.
go. Okay, I'm finding it. Just give me a moment here.
No worries. This is a major project that we're really interested in, so take your time. We're excited to learn what you have to share with us. There you go.
Okay, so you should have a map in front of you of the forest and the surrounding area.
Yeah,
Those
it's
yellow
there.
dots there are the points and the labels for the weeds that we found. We tended to stay on more of the periphery, the outside borders of the forest in our hiking around last week, but that doesn't, I mean, we can certainly do a more comprehensive survey at some other time, but this is what we got last week in an afternoon. And the reason I wanted to stay on some of the outer edges of it is because that's where a lot of weeds come in. As it comes in from the trailheads, people track them in, or they just drift into open spots. So you can see here we've got English holly is popping up. That was one of the ones that we saw a fair amount of. And I'll try and zoom in here. Give it a second to bring the dots back. So we came in from the Fairhaven Park trailhead over here. I should tell you that there's a fair amount of English hawthorn. For some reason, it's not popping up on my map tonight, but there is a fairly decent and mature population of English hawthorn over here. And English hawthorn is listed on the noxious weed list. And I should backtrack just a little bit in that we have a noxious weed list, and I see that you posted it on the page for the meeting tonight. Oh, so you've got a copy there. That's great. And we revise that every year, and we go pretty much what's on the weed list is what gets our attention, and they're all non-native invasive plants. We don't have any native species on the weed list. And then we have priorities of weeds, and most of the weeds that we found in Chuckanut Community Forest are C class or B class, which is, they're more widespread, more commonly found in Whatcom County and in Western Washington. We didn't find any unusual or rare class A noxious weeds, which if we did, we'd move in to try and see about helping eradicate those. These other ones are for management, and we're not requiring control at this point. So we had English holly over here. We came upon some European mountain ash, which is a monitor species. It's not a regulatory species at this point. There are English ivy patches around. I was very happily surprised to see that herb Robert, which is a really common and invasive understory problem for forests here in Whatcom County and Western Washington, there really wasn't huge swaths or populations of herb Robert, which I completely expected to find. So that was another nice surprise. And I should say overall, I was really pleased with this forest, this ecosystem is at a point where it's starting to see some impacts, some moving in from invasive species, but by and large, it's a really well-established native plant community. And I've seen other forests that are just a little bit too far gone to intervene. This one is really minimally impacted, and it's still feasible at this point to move in and remove some of those things by hand, and perhaps get some volunteers in the community involved, and stick to a mechanical removal at this point. So the impacts are minimal. It's not pristine, but it's really a nice forest to be in. I really enjoyed it just because I wasn't seeing so many horrible, noxious things. So that's always good for me. So Herb Robert, we have some periwinkle that's over near this trailhead leading in off at Chuckanut. The Scotch broom, these are Scotch brooms out here and here. And that's mostly along Chuckanut Drive, and that could very well be WSDOT right of way rather than forest, but I felt it was good to mark them.
Yep.
Sweet woodruff is another ornamental. It looks like perhaps in the community over here that this trailhead was at one time used for a yard waste dump. And when people dump their yard waste, you end up with ornamentals spreading into forested areas. It happens a lot, unfortunately. So sweet woodruff is over there. And along with some, let me zoom in here. I think these are both sweet woodruff. Yeah, and then we've got periwinkle over here, which is vinca. It's a little evergreen ground cover with purple flowers. So we did find some of that in there. Then back out to English holly. There's some more periwinkle over here by this trailhead, which I thought was interesting. And English ivy comes and goes. There are actually some places in the forest where it's not up in the trees, it's only on the ground. It still
Hi,
does
Leah, this
damage
is
to the
Bob. I
ground.
thought I'd follow up and let you know I figured it out, and I do have audio.
Okay.
Bob, we can hear you. Maybe you want to mute.
I
Mr.
muted him.
Carmichael? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. This technology, it can be very trying. I've experienced it myself. So for my board meetings, so I empathize. So the English ivy, I was saying, not all of it has gone up in the trees. It's pretty easy to solve up in the trees. Actually, that's the easier part. You can cut them around the base of the trunk and let the above ground plants die off. The understory is more of a concern because it can crowd out native plants in the understory and do damage there. That being said, again, there isn't vast swaths of English ivy in this forest, which is great. We did have a Class A over here on the interurban trail. It's nearby. It's not in the forest, but it's nearby. It's giant hogweed. We had 2 plants that showed up a couple of years ago. They have since been controlled and removed, and so they're not there anymore. There's another little ground cover plant called Lesser Celandine, which is a Class B noxious weed. And we've been small patches of that we've been digging up along the trail as well. And again, that's outside of the forest. It travels really well on shoes and boots, and it's a cute little thing. So people have traded it, and gardeners like to share stuff, and people have shared it in the past. Now it's illegal to buy, sell, or transport in the state. So no more of the sharing of that. We've also got a little knotweed, and I'm sure that's probably not the only patch outside the forest. But I didn't see anything within the property, which is great. Some more English holly, European mountain ash over here. And then if I zoom in here, this is where the bamboo species is. It's in with some Scotch broom, which is the only patch of Scotch broom that I saw within the boundaries of the forest. That being said, they're young Scotch broom. They probably drifted in because this is an opening, and or maybe got tracked in and grew because there's sunlight there. They really need the sunlight. They're young plants. They could be weed wrenched out pretty easily. And if I click on this dot right here, it'll give you all the information. It gives you the latitude, longitude, the date we were out there, the address, and how many plants are there. So, and there are photos attached to these files as well. But you can see here, I made the comments that it's in the forest opening. There are younger plants and they can be wrenched out. And by wrenching, I mean, we have a specialized tool that's just for Scotch broom, and we loan those out for free. We just loaned our entire fleet out to the Whatcom Land Trust last weekend for their Earth Day work out at Maple Creek, and they wrenched up a whole bunch of Scotch broom. Wow. And the tool was invented specifically for Scotch broom. It also works on small woody trees. So it might work on some European mountain ash and some hawthorn that's in the forest as well. So it has multiple uses to go after young invasive trees that are out there.
Laura,
Yes.
Is it true that while Scotch broom is in blooming, if you cut it to the ground, you get, pretty decent kill rate?
Yeah, you can. There are different methods. That's a good question. The weed wrench is one of the options. The other one is to cut it down to the ground. On older plants, we've gone in and cut the plants in the fall about 6 inches to 8 inches above ground. And then we've taken a knife and girdled all the bark off the stump. And that has killed Scotch broom as well. And when you do that, I'm glad you brought that up, because when you do that, you save the soil disturbance from happening. Anytime you pull up a weed, especially a Scotch broom, you're disturbing the soil, and any seeds that have dropped off the Scotch broom, are exposed to sunlight because of that disturbance, and water and air and all that, and they germinate. So sometimes you can get a flush of seedlings behind a Scotch broom pole.
Yep.
So yeah, that's another option, definitely. The mechanical options are pretty good for Scotch broom.
Thank you.
Sure. And then again, here's that weird little bamboo planting that's in there. Again, I don't know how it got in there.
Was there much bamboo there or just a little?
Well, let me see if I can bring up a picture here. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I guessed it at about 600 square feet.
Really?
So that's a sizable patch.
Wow.
And I don't think it's really noticeable because it's a very short bamboo. Let's see if I can bring up.
It can become quite problematic though, right?
Here's the photo, if you can see that.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty short. It almost looks variegated. I can't determine whether it's variegated or just burned back from the winter, because the leaf margins were all kind of beigey white and brown. And if I go, I go here, I can go to the second image and give you a little closer look. But it would be easy to not notice this because it kind of looks like grass, but it's got a much broader, shorter leaf. It could be mistaken for reed canary grass, for example. But the fact that it was so green and fat and short, it's just not your typical over your head jungle-like bamboo plants.
Are there methods to control it that are relatively easy to pursue, or not so much?
Excavators. When you get in a situation like this, you're definitely looking at excavation, or you're looking at chemical treatment.
Or panda bears.
What's that?
Maybe
Bears.
a panda bear.
Yeah, we could get some pandas. That would be great. Sounds like a grant. Get some grant funding for pandas. Yeah, so I'm not sure what the solution is on that. You can see there's ivy in here hanging out with it. Birds of a feather kind of thing, where all the ivy's hanging out.
Can you do things like block the sun, like simply cover them with something where they die then, or?
Yeah, with some plants it's going to work. If it could be experimented with in there with black plastic, or even maybe with solarizing, where you use clear plastic in the heat of the summer to kind of bake things. If that was to be tried, somebody would need to check on it and make sure the tarp or the cover is staying down, and it'd have to be there for a long term, like for a few years. And then you'd have to keep looking at the edges of the tarp to make sure things aren't poking out the edges. Bamboo is sharp when it first comes up. Most bamboos are, I don't know about this one, but most bamboos have a pretty sharp point on their leaf tip when they first emerge, and they can poke right through plastic. So you wouldn't want to have the plastic taut over the bamboo. You'd want it a little bit loose so that leaf comes up, and instead of poking through it, it just bends because the plastic or the whatever tarp cover you choose is looser. So it bends over.
Is this what you're showing us now? Is that publicly available? Can we search that and go take a look around? And
yeah, unfortunately, we're not really set up. This is a program that's given to us through Washington State Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
And they haven't made it available to the public on a really useful scale. I can show you this, which is their public weed data viewer, and I could send along the link to you folks so that you could have a look at it. But if you get any closer than this, I can scroll in, the points all disappear.
Oh.
And that's because of private property
Mhm.
issues that they're trying to, keep things private. So
Right.
you can certainly get a look. You can get a look at the whole state if that's what you want to see. I mean, those counties that participate in WSDA's mapping program, which are most of the counties, not all, but most of them, some of them have their own mapping program. But as I zoom back, you can see that, you could go across the state and the whole state's covered with yellow dots of all kinds of different species. But I'm happy to send that link along for whatever use it would be. But again, you're going to get this information, but not much more. So anyway, I just wanted to impress upon all of you that I think the forest is in good shape. It's in a good position to be protected. It's getting a little bit of invasion, but it's not terrible. And that makes
If you were to
me pretty hopeful for
prioritize
this
that
site.
list in terms of what should be addressed first, is there an easy
Good question.
prioritization you'd say?
I think that I would go after English ivy first, just because it's so limited and it can take off so badly.
There has been some effort, I think, up in the northeast corner. There was some effort, and I think maybe in another place too. But there has been some community effort around that, I think, in the past. You may
excellent.
well be aware of that and know more about it than me.
Yeah, that's great. And because Scotch broom's so easy and it's in the central part and it's so centrally located all together, it'd be easy to work on that too and get that out of there.
And is it pretty successful with the Scotch broom if you use
Yeah.
your extractor device?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the cutting and the girdling the bark, all those methods are proving to be pretty successful. It's just, we still have lots of Scotch broom because there's just so much of it. It's hard for anybody to keep up with it.
Yeah, there's quite a bit all along the right of way with Chuckanut Drive. I mean, there's an extensive amount of it. And in some of the private property adjoining us to the south, there's quite a bit of English ivy that's not on our own place, but and up, 60, 80 feet in the trees, long ways.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. Down Chuckanut is quite bad. So even more reason to protect the forest from that creeping up here and invading into there. And I think the fact that you've got such wonderful, mature trees and good cover and good established, diversity of plants in there, it is protecting it to some extent. And it needs a little bit of a hand. And especially, I don't know about if anybody's tracking the traffic in Chuckanut Community Forest, but we've been watching just the traffic that's going on in our county parks this year has been pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
People have needed to get out, and it's perfectly understandable.
There's actually
I just know that with more people, there's more weeds that can get tracked in.
Active soil disturbance going on the very south end of the property on some adjacent private property that's kind of trail building on private property, but with machinery.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that it seems like soil disturbance is a major source of new invasive
Absolutely
species?
Yeah.
Are there best practices that we could advise the people doing that to follow so that we don't make that a nidus of infection for the rest of the forest?
One of the most important practices, I think, is clean equipment. And this is a hard one for people to really get next to and start doing as a habit. But hosing down equipment before it comes in and making sure it's cleaned up so that it doesn't track things from other sites wherever the equipment's been used. And then also establishing cover on whatever exposed soil that you have. That's really important to get something in there that you want, even if it's temporary. Otherwise, Mother Nature's going to pick something out. It's going to be something opportunistic, like a weed.
Is there a cover you'd recommend generally? Is there a few things?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the site. Yeah. Try to stick to native plants and get them, especially a restoration, get planted right away. But if it's a sunny spot and you just need to cover, an annual grass of some sort to cover until you can get some plants in.
Maybe wood chips?
Wood chips would be great. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It just
That's
sort
what
of
we're
depends
talking
on your end, your end intent for that site. What it is.
Well, there
you
are
wanna
bike
do with it.
trails that people are developing, and it potentially is, but with a person I think would be quite cooperative with us if we
Oh,
could,
good.
if we had practical ideas on what to do. I
Yeah.
think cleaning the equipment's a good idea.
Yeah.
And then putting some sort of cover in,
Yeah.
wood chips like my colleague John suggested. Are a
And
great
get
idea.
hard chips and try to get an arborist that's not, sometimes you get stuff in wood chips too. And
Yeah.
ivy's an easy one to get. If somebody's taken down trees with ivy attached to them, then it's possible you get ivy in the wood chips. It doesn't happen very often, but it does.
Mhm.
It does happen.
And wood chips will then degrade and natural things will come up through them from the local plants. Is that, or do you need to plant things as well as do wood chips?
Say that again, Frank. I didn't quite catch that.
Is the wood chips, will it allow for natural reclamation through local plants, or is it going to need to be planted?
Eventually you'd want to plant it, I suppose.
Mhm.
Again, depending on your site, but the wood chips do cover the soil and keep the weed seeds from settling in.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an immensely helpful presentation. I think it's really very eye-opening to all of us. I think we all were worried, probably more worried than what the presentation was. A little bit reassuring to me. We've got a defined set of things we can begin to work on. And
Absolutely.
We've got basically a high health rating, which I really appreciate that you believe that it's basically a sound, intact system. Sometimes places have been beat up pretty bad, so you never know. And I think then the other thing, we probably would want to consult you guys a little bit if there is reclamation work that goes on, thoughtful ways to minimize the creating any problems when that reclamation work is done in terms of closing down trails or reclaiming things that are made into biking jumps, for example, that are part of the forest. Really important things to talk about. Do you have more to present?
No, I don't. I just have, I'm just kind of curious, is there a timeline for developing the plan and incorporating the invasive species
Well,
issue into it?
we're working with the city right now. And so it's really a matter of how we cooperatively work with them. Right now we have a role. Once we've finished paying off the loan, we will sunset as a board unless something is done to perpetuate it. And so that would be probably a 2-year horizon where we'll be involved. But we also, there is going to be a long-term planning document that will guide the city and us and whoever then holds the conservation easement. And so there is an opportunity both during our tenure and however it plays out after our tenure to have, I think weed control is an essential part of a healthy forest, and that we really are, our main goal is to preserve the forest in perpetuity. So that means get the weeds out as soon as we can, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the forest is in a good position for that.
Great.
Definitely. I've seen a lot worse. I really have. So
Yeah.
It's got a real nice fighting chance.
And I think we can certainly marshal volunteers in the community to do things like taking out the Scotch broom or the English ivy. And then,
Hey, Laurel, do you think goats would eat that bamboo? Like if you brought a goat in there for the day and just staked it out and sat with it.
Yeah, you could put goats in there. I think the problem with goats is they're just smart enough to get themselves into trouble.
Well, you want to see with them
then-
so the cooler don't eat them.
They do rent out goats for vegetation management. It's just that you could do the same thing with a weed eater, basically.
Yeah.
Is there stuff that
What it
comes out
does
the
is it
other?
kills the above ground parts, but it doesn't do anything about that root system, which is
And does there stuff that come out the other end of the goat? Is it a problem though? Is there
Yeah,
going to be
fertilizes the
seed
bamboo.
burden? I mean, I mean, is
Yeah.
there an infectious part from either seeds? or
no,
the root?
no. Anything that a goat eats is not in the bamboo realm is not going to survive the internal parts of the goat. It would come out
Do
pooping
the
out
deer eat
bamboo.
the
That would be terrible. So,
wonder if the deer graze on that bamboo.
what's that?
I wonder if the deer graze on the bamboo.
Yeah, I didn't see anything snacking on that plant that
Okay.
was really obvious, but it was a fairly big patch. Who knows? Maybe they
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
Do either of the John? Do you have any questions?
Well, it's the Japanese knotweed that scares me the most.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got to keep an eye on that, even though it's not in the forest boundary.
Yeah, I agree. We do have Japanese knotweed control management tools pretty dialed in, but it does usually include chemical use. But that said, we can use it pretty minimally. We know the timing, we know the rates, and we can get things taken out that way. But
Or are there adjacent weeds we need to know about? I mean, you looked in the forest, but are there concentrations of weeds? I know you pointed out some along the trail that really aren't ours to control, if you will. But I
Right.
think, are there other threatening species? Are there Japanese knotweed? Is it nearby, or are there other species nearby that we should be
yes,
mindful of?
there is Japanese knotweed. There's spurge laurel, which is an evergreen shrub that I think I said at the beginning it's all over Fairhaven. It's been an ornamental and is no longer accepted as a nursery product, but it's really invasive and birds spread it. So they eat the blackberries off the plant. It looks like a little rhododendron. It's evergreen, shiny leaf thing.
Oh yeah, it's in our region for sure. I've seen it.
Yeah, and it's
near
got
where I
little
live,
green
actually, yeah.
flowers that
Yeah.
eat blackberries, and the birds will eat the berries and then spread them. So I fully expected to find some in there, and I didn't, which was good. They have a taproot that goes forever, and they're pretty hard to control.
Yeah, down in Chuckanut Village, there's a pretty bad invasion of that.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
quite widespread down nearby. Yeah.
yeah, and through Edgemore and Fairhaven is some of the thickest spots in the county.
And I'm surprised Herb Robert isn't a bigger problem. I
Yeah.
expect it to be a much bigger problem because it's so common elsewhere.
It's so common, and I regularly walk trails around here, and I pull up Herb Robert if I find it all by itself, because I know it won't be by itself for long. And we pulled up several plants when we were out there, Herb Robert and little mountain ash seedlings and other things that we could just pull up with our bare hands. And little
Is
ivy
there
plants.
educational material we could make available, like in a sign or something, about what to look for? Or it's sort of dangerous make that information available because people might pull out the wrong things, of course. But is there
Right.
interpretive
There is
things
always
are there interpretive things that you would recommend we do?
There could be some interpretive signing. I think they did that in the Padden Creek Daylight Project for noxious weeds. The city did. We also have, if you've been to Lookout Mountain or Stimson or Hertz Trail, we've got in other county parks, we've got these boot brush stations that have there's a boot brush at the bottom of the sign, and then the top of the sign says, stop invasive species in their tracks, wipe off your shoes before you go in the forest. And those get a lot of use, and it brings about the awareness that people should be cleaning their shoes, before they go in. I think a lot of people use it to clean their shoes before they get in their car, but that's fine. Just getting in the habit of using it, I think, is great. So that's another form of outreach that we have found to be pretty successful. In terms of, having people pull weeds up on a regular basis, it'd be good if they were trained in identification. It happens a lot, unfortunately, when people think that they're pulling up something that's invasive. For instance, native bleeding heart looks a lot like herb Robert when it doesn't have flowers. And it'd be easy for people to mistake the two and start pulling up a good native plant instead of herb Robert. So that's always good to have volunteers. It just needs to be sort of monitored, and I wouldn't encourage the general public to go pull weeds out there.
Yeah.
We
And
have,
Go ahead.
we have had one volunteer who today sent me an email offering if there's a work party on noxious weeds that she'd like to be part of it. She's already a steward in Arroyo Park for that.
Oh, great. Wonderful.
Yeah, I think she worked at, I did a work party Saturday at 10th and Donovan, and we've got serious problems there. We've got clematis, we've got English ivy, we've got blackberries, you name it, we've got it. And I would recommend, I'd put a plug in for Amy Brown, who's the park volunteer coordinator, to put a work party together. I think you could easily get enough people there to target some of these locations. And I don't know whether Amy or Public Works has access to your map, but that would be really useful.
Oh, we could make sure they get access.
Yeah, I was really impressed. I got
Provide
15
something.
or I got 15 or 16 or 17 or 18 volunteers working hard on my site. And I think the idealism could be easily carried over to the Chuckanut Community Forest. As I said, one of those people, I think, contacted you people. So.
Yeah, I think Amy is who organized the other ivy extraction effort on the northeast edge of the forest. And I think they also have tools and things that they bring, as I recall.
Yeah, and like I said, we do have weed wrenches for loan for small trees if those would be helpful.
And so it might make sense to try to take out that Scotch broom along the road because it's just kind of blowing in the wind and into the forest.
Yeah, I wasn't too worried about the Scotch broom along the road. It doesn't like shade, and it needs those open areas which are in the center of the property. Mm-hmm. That said, still a little pressure for WashDOT to take care of what's on their right of way is never a bad thing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your presentation. Are there, does the
welcome.
public have any comments or questions? I know there are a number of people who have joined us. Steve, Dale, Rena?
No,
Or
thanks
Reese?
a lot for the presentation, but we'll do what we can to get some people out for work parties.
I think that's Steve Wilson speaking, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Arena, you're muted. You have to unmute yourself, I think.
I'm unmuted now. I didn't want to jump in. Thank you so much for the presentation, Laurel. I guess Steve's in touch with getting info out to the South neighborhood, but I don't know if you want us to drop our email down here to stay in touch, or I'm not sure. I guess I can rely on Steve.
I have the South Neighborhood Association main email and Steve. So if something is brought up that's brought to my attention, I can let people know about it.
Great. Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, Arena.
Well, any other comments about the noxious weeds and how their control?
One thing I wanted to say is that probably someone from City Parks would want to talk to you just as part of the master planning process. They're gathering information on everything right now. So,
Yeah, I'd be happy to share information with them.
okay, I'll let them know.
Yeah. Who is
Thank
it
you.
that's working on it? Do you know, Robin?
Lane Potter is working on it, and she has a intern, Carlina Burdick, who's working with her. So Carlina has been in touch with me about some information.
Okay. Yeah. Feel free to pass my contact information along. I'm happy to work with them on that.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your presentation. It was very helpful and
Oh, good. I'm
thank
glad
you
you
so much.
found some good information there.
Well, and I hope we can work together to make our community noxious weed free as a goal over the long term. We want to be your partners in that and preserving the health of the forest. So thank you.
Definitely. I think it's definitely doable.
Great, good. That's
Great.
really encouraging. I'd like to now go ahead and move on to the next item, which is the public comment period. And if you'd like to join us, you're welcome to stay. But if you want to go, we'd understand, Laura.
I think I am going to go. I've got somebody waiting to pick up some weed wrenches, actually. So I'm going to go. All right.
Well,
Thanks
you very
again,
much.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Laurel.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. We would like to take a few minutes here at the beginning to allow anyone in the public that wants to make a 3-minute comment on any topic that they choose. We'd be happy to hear from anybody that has a comment at this time. Just go ahead and unmute if there's somebody that'd like to speak.
I want you to get your clothes ready for tomorrow.
If someone was speaking, that's a little, I couldn't quite hear what they said. Might have been the background of somebody speak. Steve, Dale, Reese's. Great, okay. We'll come back to that at the end and give people another chance if things come up before the end. I'd like to now take us to the topic of approving the minutes of the March 24th meeting. Have people had a chance to review, and are there any corrections, additions, or deletions that need to take place with those documents? Hugh or John?
No, I didn't see. I read through them again today, and they look great to me. So I move that we accept the minutes from last month, March.
Right. Do I
I'll
second?
second that. I'll second that.
Moved and second. If there's no further discussion, I'd like to call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, it passes unanimously, accepted. The next thing is to really, John, if you have a Park Advisory Board meeting report, any information that we need from that most recent meeting?
I forwarded that to the commission about 3 weeks ago, and I didn't see anything significant that had to do with us. So
I reviewed that. I didn't see anything either. And do you know when the next meeting is, John?
it's usually the second Wednesday morning of the month.
So was there one between the one that you sent us and that, was there that meeting happened? Or are those the minutes from that meeting from this month?
Actually, I think those were March minutes, and it takes them a couple weeks to come out, at least to me. So they should have had a meeting on the 14th, 2 weeks ago. And I'm not sure if it was the March or the April minutes I sent out, but like I said, I have much.
They were March, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll try again.
We'll look for the ones when they're available.
Yeah, we can ask John Blethyn if he's still on.
Yeah, John's there.
I don't remember anything that's too relevant to the Chuckanut Community Forest. I did alert the Greenways Committee that a task force was forming and trying to encourage someone from the the Greenways Committee to add their perspective. And I alerted the park board. I think there was some brief comment from Nicole about going to the meeting and Lane about starting the process, but I don't remember anything in great detail. It's still, the process is still very much in the formative stage.
Great, thank you, John. So we'll accept that former report as the most current one and look forward to the next one when it's available. Under old business, the Master Plan Steering Committee, John Brown is one of our liaisons there, and he provided a note from Lane Potter. It's in our agenda there. You can read it yourself, but it basically says that there's they are in receipt of and looking forward to working with us and currently being reviewed. They're working with an intern from Western to identify and organize historic reports, including the draft 2015 baseline study that was done, and determine if there's overlap or redundancies and try to develop a single plan from those prior documents. And they're working to solidify the last few members of the steering committee, and we'll send a doodle poll shortly about the bi-weekly meetings for the group as they move forward. And that's the written report from John Brown from Lane Potter. Were we able to get Annalise Burns, the Habitat and Restoration Manager of Public Works, for the meeting? She's not. I didn't see her in the agenda, and in the people that are attending the meeting.
Today, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she felt like this wasn't really, the noxious weeds was not really her strong suit. And I can talk more when we get to her potential presentation that she wants to do to us.
I think that's where we're at now. I didn't know.
Well, actually, I have another thing on the master plan.
Okay. What?
I actually have a couple of things. Nicole Oliver sent out a note this afternoon that I got just before the meeting, and she basically just said what Lane Potter was saying, that they're refining the master plan outline, timeline, and planning process, as well as collecting and coalescing all the existing studies, reports, and background data that we have on the forest and surrounding area. The outline provided by the board included extensive environmental inventory and assessment, most of which can be gleaned from existing reports and studies that can be refined and referenced as part of the plan. I've also been pulling together the history of the area and details of the many associated parcel acquisitions in the interurban basin that adjoin the forest. She said the steering committee will launch next month. They've also spent time with environmental staff at the city with expertise and history about this property, as well as other habitat assessment work done in this and the surrounding areas. We are also starting to design some public participation and outreach materials and mechanisms, including a self-guided tour and survey. And then she says, I look forward to getting the district's feedback on the proposed trail map and hearing about the restoration efforts suggested via the upcoming public hearing. Thanks, and see you soon, Nicole.
You send that out to all of us, please?
I did send it out in an email that I sent just before the meeting. I copied it into the email. And so you do have that. And then there was what was the other thing I was thinking? They're still looking for, they have a printed copy of the baseline master plan document that had the recommendations in it, but they were looking for a digital copy. And the version that I have that has the recommendations is from June 2015. And Taryn Malloy from Carmichael Clark said that had later versions, but not that earlier one. Though I did send her another email about it, but if we don't have it, that's fine. They do have the printed copy of it.
I'll talk, this is Bob Carmichael. Sorry for not being able to hear at the very beginning of the meeting. I'll look at that with Taryn. I saw your email, Robin. I knew what you were looking for. There are several draft versions of that. And it's possible we didn't keep all of them, but I think we should have the early draft that has the recommendations. Does the draft that has the recommendations that's in print form, is that the earliest version as far as you know?
As I was not around for the process, I don't actually know that, but it was it was a printed up and bound up version of it that I have. So, and that's the earliest version I have. I don't know if anybody else has an earlier version.
Have we checked with Ann Eisinger?
I have not, but I could.
She might have it since it was her document. And I think we might too. I'm not ruling it out, but maybe a quick call to Ann Eisinger, see if she has her first version that has all the draft recommendations.
Okay.
I would try that.
Okay.
Okay,
That document was considerably more complex than the ultimate product, is my understanding. Is that correct, Bob?
I wouldn't say more complex. I would say that the main point that we don't have now are the recommendations.
Right, that weren't in the written.
But
right.
Yeah, it's not like there was a huge amount of editing of the substance of the document or the recommendations at the end that got taken out for the most part. One of the things that when I read Nicole's email, which I understand not everyone's seen, that Robin sent out just before the meeting, I'm encouraged by some of the things Nicole has said here, that they're really seem going to town on getting into these assessment reports, which is great. She makes a statement where she says the outline provided by the board included extensive environmental inventory and assessment, most of which can be gleaned from existing reports and studies that can be refined and referenced as part of the plan. I'm a little bit concerned that Nicole is going to think by pulling all these documents together, she's going to have most of what she needs. But there's a lot to be done that, I mean, if you were to tell Ann Eisinger that, I think she would say, well, that's not true at all. There's all these things that are missing from the baseline report. Ann felt that the baseline report was charitably bare bones. We did it the way we had to do it, but Ann would have liked a lot more to have been included in it and more work to be done. So I think it's important to talk with her about it too.
I think that's a really good idea, Bob. I'll try to reach out to her in the next week or so and see and engage her around that issue and see what additional comments she might have, and if she has an additional electronic draft of that earlier one that had the recommendations in it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that Annalise Barnes did a presentation for the Happy Valley Neighborhood Association a couple weeks back on their forest management thing. And it's pretty much a LiDAR count of trees from the air, you know, and projections and such. And it's 2 years old already. And by the time they go through different steps. It'll be outdated, I think, but for all the growth that happens in Bellingham and the trees that get cut down and whatever. But they were just trying to estimate coverage of forests, percentage coverage of trees within the urban areas. You know. So just for general information there.
And Robin, the cut and paste on the meeting notice that you added for Nicole, that's the only, that is the communication from her. There's nothing more than that. Okay, great. I thought there might have been something more.
No, there's just those 2 paragraphs and then those other paragraphs from Lane that John got. I also know that we have other stuff too, mushroom and fungal things that are not really anywhere. I know that Vince is on the steering committee and you guys are and can bring that up as well, but I might mention that to them that we have, because I'm communicating with their intern right now, so.
I guess to get back to our agenda item on the second item under old business, is there an interest in inviting Annalise Burns to come and talk with us, or is that something she's looking at data for the urban forest management plan assessment, wildlife corridors, forest structure, the things discussed in that note? So thinking about having her come in May.
Well, that's what we were going to do originally. And I did send an email out to you that she cannot do it in May because she first has to present it to city council.
Yeah.
So I asked her about potential dates because Nicole had mentioned that they'd like to have the steering committee be at that presentation too. And I told them that the only way we could do it would be at an official board meeting, whether it was a special or a regular one. And Annalise said sometime after July 15th. So I was thinking that we don't have anything scheduled for the July meeting. That might be a good time to have her do the presentation.
Great. Would you ask her to do that then, to join us for our July 15th meeting?
Well, it's July 23rd, but
23rd, yeah.
Yes, I will do that.
Great, thanks.
All right.
And then the other old business, just an update on the public hearing on restoration of the June board meeting. And John McLaughlin is going to work to put out the public hearing notice and actually have a public hearing on the restoration activities in June. Is that correct? He'll be back from his research by then?
Yeah, he's going to be back on the 7th of May. And I asked him if we could collaborate on getting that information so I can post it on the website and doing the public hearing notice so I can get it out early. So I'm hoping to get it out before mid-May.
Great.
And I was wondering, do you want me to try and put it out, like try and put that like in a calendar for the week, the weekly part of the Herald or things like that, just to try and gather more interest in it?
Sure. Do you know what the cost of that is, or?
I don't think there's a cost.
Oh, sure.
Right.
I think that's a great idea. The more people know about it, the better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll work on getting that information to those places.
So this is really an informational item that we're still planning on bringing that forward in after the mid-May input to the June meeting.
Yeah, so the planning on the public hearing being at the June meeting.
Right. New business. Election for John Hymas board position. So John is retiring from our board. Thank you, John, for your long service. I think with Vince, you are the senior person now on the board. And
no, I just have to run for election again.
You're going to do that?
Well, I didn't say I was retiring.
Oh, I thought you said you were.
No,
Oh, that's
no.
great. So you're thinking of running again.
Well, I may as well.
I hope you are,
Great.
John.
Yeah, what the heck? I mean, I don't like that it's going to cost us a few $1,000s because I don't know if I'll even be opposed, but you know, I want to see it through.
Great. That's great. Yeah.
Great.
I misunderstood your objection about the cost of it and your willingness to serve. So if you're going to serve, that's great.
Yeah. And I think, Robin, do I have to go down to the auditor and declare pretty soon? Like this?
The date, and I wrote it down, and of course I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it was May 17th to 21st is the timeline in which you have to file. And
All
you
right.
can do that online.
Oh.
And you know, I went through and I read all the paperwork and everything they have at the Whatcom County election site. And so I will get together with you before then and just make sure that we have all the ducks in a row and help you file that if you want me to do that. So
Yeah, it's as I recall, it's pretty easy. I can probably just go down there and do it, you know. But yeah,
The election stuff we probably don't want to do as a board, and Robin, you probably shouldn't do it either.
oh, that's right. You're right. Didn't think
From a
about that. Anyway,
procedural
it's
point of
pretty
view.
simple.
yeah, they can walk me through it down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just
I
let
would
you know the
suggest
date.
I would suggest you go at the beginning of the week, not wait till the last minute though, because they get a little crowded there now sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
The other item on the new business was discussing when to start in-person board meetings. And Bob, is there a recommendation about that you're aware of? Mr. Carmichael?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a recommendation. I don't yet have a single municipal client, including the city of Linden, that is doing in-person meetings. So I think that most municipalities are waiting to see more progress. I don't know what the likelihood of that is. You know that better than I do. But as far as what we can legally do in phase 3, which is where we are right now, we can meet in person with proper social distancing, with everyone wearing masks. And so that, I think that's what dissuades most, the idea of everyone having to wear masks at the meeting. You can't see the faces and that sort of thing, whereas on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or GoToMeeting, the others, you can at least see people and talk. So I think that that we can go. It's an answer to your question. Yes, I think if this board wants to start meeting in person, it can do so. It will just be subject to masking requirements, social distancing requirements, and so on. And I could put together a list of what the requirements are if you like.
In terms of the bigger picture, I can tell you that there is still a fair amount of disease in Whatcom County, particularly in North County. And although it has come down significantly, it is still present. The other thing is that immunization rates may not achieve the necessary number of people or percentage of the population to allow us to have community immunity or herd immunity. There is a real threat both in our county and in the state and in the nation that there may be enough vaccine hesitancy that we may not reach that number. The other thing that's operative is that the vaccine for kids, there will be some expansion down probably to 12 years old in the fairly near future, but the rest of children are unlikely to be offered vaccine for some months. Estimates run between September and actually next year. So there is going to be some potential for spread moving forward. even when the pandemic is officially ended, it will still probably be an endemic disease. There will probably still continue to be isolated cases. There will probably continue to be local outbreaks, although not with the potential to bring down our healthcare system or have large numbers of people die. This isn't something that's just going to go away, probably for the foreseeable future. And additional vaccines are likely to be necessary for the main vaccines we relied upon. The mRNA vaccines are likely to require booster doses, both because there is waning immunity from them. There are breakthrough cases even after 90 days. And there is also a need to change the vaccine coverage to cover some of the more important variants that are present. Probably the majority of the cases currently present in our county are variant strains, either the UK strain, which is quite common in Whatcom County, or the California strains. They're probably at this point more common than the original virus.
What is the likelihood that
and more potentially serious?
Yeah, what is the likelihood that there will be the ability to meet indoors without masks, pursuant to state requirements, of that changing?
It certainly could change, but I think that's going to be one of the last things to change. Masking, it doesn't really protect the wearer, it protects other people. So it's really, to prevent spread from someone that might have the infection. That, I think those recommendations for indoor gatherings are going to be in place for some time. By that, I mean beyond July. I think we're going to get as good a coverage as we're going to get by July. There's ready access to anybody that wants vaccine right now can get it. There is not going to be any barrier to getting vaccine. And then the question is just how many vaccine hesitant people there will be, and nobody really knows that. Some people, I think, are just casually waiting, not wanting to rush in. But there's going to be some people that simply aren't going to get immunized. And if that's greater than about 25% of people, we're unlikely to achieve community immunity, meaning that masking may be required for an extended period of time for indoor gatherings. As you all are probably aware, outdoor gatherings, outdoor activities are already, the CDC has recommended it's okay not to wear them in outdoor activities like hiking or walking or whatever. But for indoor, I think that recommendation is going to be very slow to change, Bob.
So then another option would be if the board, and I don't know, it's up to the board entirely, if they are reluctant to want to meet indoors with masks, but do want to meet in person again, you could do it outdoors with social distancing without masks, I believe. And so that's an option.
Weather and the light will be in our favor for the next few months as well.
The light will be in our favor for the next few months, hopefully the weather too. But that's always a hit and miss sort of thing. So the board can do either one of those or can continue with the Zoom meetings.
Well, Hugh and John, do you have thoughts about that?
I think we probably have board immunity at least, don't we? Everybody's got their shot, they're both shots and had it for over 15 days, right?
I think for us, but I think we have to think about the people inviting in. We typically do have guests, not a lot of guests.
Close, we sit close and they can be at the periphery outside.
And I think the library is not yet available, if I understand correctly. Is that right, Robin?
Yeah,
So
I looked into that before the meeting, and until I don't know what they're going to be when they're open, but they're not having meetings as long as they're closed to the public. So we'll have to wait till they actually open, which is supposedly late spring. So I may know something at the next meeting.
But we could do it at 18th and Larrabee. That place is a public place and it's available for meetings. We do our Happy Valley meeting there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We'd have to notice it to make sure everybody knew we are changing the location.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And,
we could probably even do that if people didn't want to come and they just wanted to watch it or participate on Zoom. We could probably even set it up where we could do the meeting outside at Larrabee at the gazebo and still have it on Zoom at the same time.
that will
That'd be-
take a little more work, and I can look into that. You know, it's challenging because you need to have just one camera with everybody. If everybody has separate phones that they're on Zoom, then you have audio problems. So I would have to look into, I don't think one laptop would do it for getting everybody on it. I don't know. I can look into that.
I would suggest we table this to our next meeting and bring it up again then. I think it'll be clear how the immunization rates are going. It'll be, and Robin, if you could explore the technological piece, that might be helpful. And then we can check to see about the scheduling, if that space is already scheduled by somebody else at the time we meet. And there's some practical things I think we can look at and then come back.
There's another there's another practical thing we need to consider, which is so we would need to make an adjustment in our policies and procedures if we're going to meet someplace other than the Fairhaven Library, because we have adopted those policies and procedures, and they clearly call out that regular meetings are held at the Fairhaven in the fireplace room of the Fairhaven branch of the public library.
So that we both need to make that decision, and then we'd have to notice it so that people are aware of that well ahead of time, right? Do you know how far ahead, Bob?
I don't think that that's going to be a problem. No, there's not a time period requirement for that. It has to be at least 24 hours, but the bigger question is amending our policies to allow the flexibility to meet somewhere else.
And would amending our policy would also require notice before we took action on it, I assume?
No, actually.
We could just do that tonight if we wanted to.
You could. We don't have any paperwork for it, but you could do a motion and direct us to do an amendment that you could assign at the next meeting.
John and you, what do you feel about that? We could certainly, we could give ourselves the space to do it by considering a motion that would allow for more flexibility in where we meet.
Yeah. Just say we'll be meeting anywhere within the district with 10 days notice in advance.
Bob, does that sound like a legally sound way to present the question? Or the alternative language?
We could do that. I think as a default, we want to leave it at the Fairhaven Library, but then we could say the regular meeting may be altered to a different location with 10 days prior notice. That notice would be to all the commissioners, and presumably we put it on the district's website. Yes, we could do that.
And the meeting notice that we send out too, right? And that's the operative one.
And the emails that are sent out, right? Are we in a position to then have some sort of electronic access, or would this be only in person? So if somebody wanted to participate, would they be able to electronically, or would they have to come to the meeting?
Well, that would take, I think that's the thing we were asking Robin to evaluate. I mean, for example, internet access at an outdoor gazebo may not be as straightforward as it might seem. And if everybody uses a phone, that presents some logistics with respect to audio. It probably would be best to have one screen and one camera that captured everybody.
I'm going to suggest if the board is willing to defer it one more month and let Robin really, with maybe give her direction to explore options, and then I can have an actual amendment ready in writing for you at the next board meeting that you could approve if you want to do that. It could be kind of a fill in the blank sort of thing as to where you meet.
That sounds sensible to me. What do Hugh and John, what do you think?
Sounds good to me too.
I could envision sometime having a meeting down with Steve at the Center for Local Self-Reliance or whatever it's called there. It would be a fun place to have a meeting outside.
Yeah, so I think the language that Bob has suggested would allow us the flexibility of meeting really anywhere as long as we noticed it properly, which seems sensible to me. And then, so Bob could develop some language, and Robin, if you could explore the practicalities of different locations and see if we can come up with a place. And is the sense of the board that we want to also continue, even when we go back to in-person meetings, try to broadcast these and have electronic participation as well?
I'd like to do that. I think it's way more democratic, but it hasn't been done before, that's for sure.
And John, you got thoughts?
No, I pretty much feel the same way as you. Let's give it another month, and then maybe by then the library will have a date when they're going to open to the public.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Robin, do you have enough direction to know what we're just asking you to look for alternative sites, check back with the library to see when they might be open, and then to explore if we find alternative sites and electronic compatibility with our needs to have something we could broadcast from, and the gear to do that, I guess. All right.
Yeah, I will. I feel like I have enough, and I'll probably call Hugh and ask him a few questions, and if I have any other thoughts, I'll give a call. But yeah, I think I have enough to go forward.
So I don't think we need a motion for that. I think we can just accept that discussion as adequate and come back to it at our next meeting, basically moving that item forward to the next meeting. Now to the mundane part, the monthly expenses and cash flow sheets. Have people had a chance to look at those? And the treasurer's report, they're pretty straightforward. We've got a balance in WECU of $2,967 and petty cash. And then we've got the treasury report as of the 31st of March. As of 3/1, $20,816 ending unencumbered cash balance. And as of 3/31, 265,016, 265,000. And we received tax revenues of $51,940 and paid $5,769 in operating expenses, and $1,968 was paid on our loan to the city of Bellingham. Any questions about those? And then the current debt outstanding as of 3/31/2021 is $645,233. And Robin, our payment to Bellingham was just $1,000. It was a little less than $2,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, it'll be much larger for this month because, and so they sort of do bigger chunks every so often, so they don't do it every month. So
all right, great. So with those being clarified, do I hear a motion to accept those reports?
I move to accept.
Second?
I second that motion.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. Now, we will need a motion to approve the direct payroll input form with wages for Robin Albro at 20.5 hours in March and a total gross of $512.50.
I move to approve Robin's payments.
I second that.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. The consent agenda is, we'll need a motion to approve this, but basically A payment on March 15th of invoice 94459 to Carmichael Clark for $958.50 for the regular professional fees. Payment April 6, 2021, invoice 32,395 to Whatcom County Administrative Services for $30 for the first quarter payroll services. Do I hear a motion to approve those two things?
Move to approve.
John Hymas moves.
I so second those motion.
Hugh seconds. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All votes unanimous. Robin will follow up after this meeting by sending the three of us an email, and we will approve it by responding to that email for these bills and things we've approved in a more formal way than just the verbally. Our next meeting will be May 26th. Is there any other discussion for the good of the order? Or is there any other public comment? We have 3 minutes for anybody that would. It looks like not a lot of people with us at this point. All right, I will consider the meeting adjourned and look forward to seeing you all next month.
Thank you, gentlemen and Robin.
Thank you,
Hi.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for attending the meeting, John and Lucy. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.